COVID-19 has drastically affected every facet of society, from how we socialize to how we conduct a business. South Africa and the world fights to and adapts, of course, to life under COVID-19. What does a post-pandemic future look like? Joining me now to talk about this is Foresight Strategist Isaac Nkama. Thank you so much for your time and Happy New Year. Good to see you.
Happy New Year too.
You know, a lot of people have been asking, if we'll even get to the point. I remember asking someone here on the show about what does a post-COVID-19 South Africa look like? And someone said to me, will we even ever have that? Is it even, something that we can realize? But when we're looking at the trends, and of course, some of the industries have been taking a knock during this time. When we look at, some of the industries and you look at the data and what has been going on, what are we looking at, particularly maybe if I can use hospitality as an example?
Well, thank you, Bongiwe, and to your listeners. I think it's befitting at this stage to just firstly start off by paying condolences to the family of Minister Jackson Mthembu, as well as Mr. Jonas Gwangwa, two outstanding human beings, and also to the families of the thousands of people that have perished.
Certainly, and it's very, very difficult, I tell you, especially when we were watching some of those visuals earlier, from Minister Mthembu's home. It tells you just how much of a huge loss it is for that particular community. And thank you so much for that. And certainly, Obab Jonas, as somewhere acting on the show tonight, certainly a very, difficult loss as the family is trying to process the death of a mother as well. And when we come back to COVID-19, I mean, Minister Mthembu was someone who was really, advocating for safety protocols, and even the ANC saying that they need to make sure that South Africa really remembers, to stick to what he always preached and how important it is going to be. But when we really talk about recovery, it's going to be important for us to know, and from people like yourselves, how things are going to be looking in the future.
Well, yes, it's certainly a relevant question. You do have sectors that will decline and those sectors that will provide opportunities in the future. Broadly speaking, all the sectors that are going to be negatively affected are going to be those that are dependent on crowds. So your sports, your entertainment, tourism, cinemas, shopping centers, all of those are going to take some time to recover. You have the vacancy rates, for instance, at shopping centers now increasing, not only because people are doing more online shopping, but also because of the anxiety that people feel when they go to shopping centers. So even those who do go to shopping centers, on average, they spend a lot less time at the shopping center. There is no browsing around. You go to the shop that you're going into, get what you want, and move out. So those are going to take a particular knock. With tourism, for instance, what would happen, though, in the mid to long term is that as people have this anxiety of international travel, especially while we are still dealing with issues of the vaccination, you're going to find that international tourism is going to decline, but domestic tourism is going to increase because people will feel a lot safer to stay within their home countries, tour within domestically, rather than internationally. So those are some of the trends that we can expect. Of course,
I'm very intrigued when you talk about particularly the malls. We saw in the previous years monstrosities being built, and these are huge malls that the investors were thinking that these are going to attract a lot more people, but as you say, they're now going to attract less and less people. Does this mean that there needs to be now a reimagining of how that space is going to be used?
Without any shadow of doubt. I think before I speak about the reimagining, let me share some statistics which I think the average person does not know. In terms of the amount of space of shopping centers in the world, South Africa is number 6 in the world. There are 24 million square meters under roof of shopping centers in South Africa. And there are only 5 countries in the world that have more shopping centers than South Africa. That's the first statistic. The second one is 88% of all retail space in sub-Saharan Africa is within South Africa. So even before COVID, there was already a complete overcapacity of shopping centers. They were already struggling in terms of their vacancy rates and so on because of the state of the economy. I mean, we all know that the economy didn't just begin being negatively affected by COVID. COVID just found a bad situation and made it worse. So that is the state of shopping centers in South Africa. There's just been a complete overcapacity. And so what's going to happen in the future is that the only way some of these mega shopping centers are going to survive is that they have to become turned into mixed-use developments, converted. And so you are increasingly in the days to come going to see shopping centers that have a part of it which is a shopping space, part of it which is community centers, apartments, a wedding venue, and more of a communal sort of living. And that is how they're going to convert, because you are not going to be able to sustain with the current economic climate. Because in the first place, retail is already struggling. There are fewer and fewer people that are going to the shopping malls already. And these mega shopping centers of 100,000 square meters and above, we aren't going to see any new ones being built. Shopping centers in the future are going to be smaller and more community-based. And so those are some of the trends in terms of the shopping centers.
That's very interesting. And I just want us to, go for a quick ad break. And when we come back, I need us just to look at, of course, around elections, because part of what I've read that you talk about is the importance of moving towards an electronic system when it comes to elections. And you also then talk about also how the moving from state towards multinational corporations is also something that is coming into effect. And I'd like to just pick your brain just about how that is going to apply to South Africa, especially because we really are finding ourselves as a globe in a very unique situation. And certainly things are not going to be done as per normal as we have been seeing them. But we continue with this conversation with Foresight Strategist Isaac Nkama in just a moment. Let's continue our conversation here with Dr. Isaac Nkama. Before we even get into the issue of elections, there was one issue that arose, particularly during, this pandemic, and when that relief fund was, that package that the president then put out, that 200 billion rand that was set out for some of the small businesses that were then going to be able to stay afloat, it really became a bone of contention. But it also showed us that entrepreneurs need to now think differently in order to try and survive, particularly going forward. What would you say are some of the distress areas that they could be looking at, and particularly to provide solutions? Because certainly that's what entrepreneurship is to provide a solution through business.
Well, yes, you're absolutely correct, Bongiwe. I think for the big players, alternative energy is always an important one, and that's going to become increasingly important. The world is going to be facing an increasing water crisis, and current technology and methodologies of water desalination, converting seawater into drinkable water, is extremely expensive. Technology in that area needs to drastically improve. For the medium to small players, there is a drastic change in some of the lifestyle. For instance, we are going to see a drop in formal clothing because people are going to the office less and less. So instead of going to the office every single day, many people are going into the office twice a week, and so they need less formal wear. More people are working from home. So you will see a decline in formal wear and an increase in informal wear. people are edgy about entertainment that is outdoor based, whether it's cinemas or anything. And so home-based entertainment is going to be one of those things that is going to grow exponentially. What has come out of COVID as well, interestingly, is that people all of a sudden realize that they need to keep their immune systems in tip-top condition. And that is why when you go into the pharmacies, many times you find that many of the key supplements, you actually will not find them. There is a key market there. And once COVID is behind us, the sales of many of these supplements is actually not going to drastically decline. People are going to want to stay a lot more healthier. We want their immune system, in tip-top condition all the time. So those are some of the areas that are going to drastically, change how we do things. You're also going to see a consolidation of the financial institutions with fintech companies, logistics companies with online shopping, and those kinds of developments.
And, moving towards the year that we find ourselves in, it's an election year. The IEC says that, elections will continue, but certainly it might be a time, as you say, and you make the case for it, to start thinking of an electronic voting system.
When people think about an electronic voting system, they think finance, because those are the obvious benefits that come with it. But there are many other side benefits that come with electronic voting. Electronic voting is a contributing factor to the maintenance of stability. Many people would not look at it that way. And how is that so? When you have elections, one of the biggest risks to stability is the delay in tabulating election results. And often, within that closure of the election date and when the election results are formally announced, there is usually a lot of suspicion, a lot of political temperatures are heightened up. So electronic elections have the effect of doing away with all of that, because effectively managed within 2 hours of closure of the last polling station, you have your results. They contribute to the environment as well. And again, that's a very indirect connection that people would not ordinarily think about. On election day, people go to polling stations. They either drive there, they use public transport, and we have all these emissions. When people vote electronically, especially when it's remote, we don't have any of that. We have ballot papers that are printed on paper, which is trees. Now, if you can imagine just the number of ballot papers in this country alone, and multiply that by the 195 countries that this world has, and you have an election in most of them every 4 or 5 years. And can you imagine how many trees that we do not have to cut down to print ballot papers that would be saved? So there are all kinds of, not just administrative, financial, but also environmental and security and stability benefits to electronic voting.
That would then mean that a lot of work needs to be done to even make sure that communities in rural areas are also capacitated to be able to take part in such an election, because we are even seeing right now through online learning in and itself that technology is really putting the battle of the haves and the have-nots at bay.
Well, yes and no, because if you look at how the financial services sector operates now, I mean, checkbooks, for instance, have been done away with. And what is taking place now is that people either do their financial transactions from the laptop or from your phone in the very same rural areas. Now, it's the very same platform. And if people feel safe enough to conduct their financial affairs online, why would they not feel safe enough to conduct, to cast their vote on through the same system? But coming back to the issue of equality, the inequality in the rural areas, again, that is another potential area for entrepreneurs, because online voting does not necessarily have to mean going to centers where you actually go to cast your vote. You can, in the same way that you transact financially, you can also do the same online voting from the very same phone. It's the very same platform, it's the very same technology, and it has exactly the same level of security. And so those are many opportunities that will be created in building that sort of infrastructure.
And Ntate Nkama, before I let you go, I know I'm out of time, but in just 30 seconds, when you look at this year and you talk about the fact that we are going to be seeing people are starting to move towards corporations, multinational corporations versus government, how is that going to affect the votes? Could it be a situation that applies to South Africa?
Well, I think just to briefly give the context is that of the top 100 economies in the world, more than half of those are not countries, but they're actually corporations. And that means that people vote for governments, but the power lies increasingly with the corporations. So the long-term meaning of that is that the significance of your vote will actually be eroding, because the people that you vote for will be wielding less and less power, and those that you're not voting for, the corporations will be wielding more and more power. And so we are seeing corporations becoming stronger and stronger. Will it apply to South Africa? Not in the same way as it applies in the United States as in Europe, but within Africa, because of the development of South Africa's economy and industry, it is the one African country that is closest to that phenomena. And if it were to start on this continent, it would certainly start with South Africa.
I tell you what, I don't think this is the last time we are going to be speaking, especially because there's a lot that I'd still need to pick your brain about. But certainly as we inch closer towards, the election, I do want us to talk more, particularly around, the inequalities and the role of the economy and how the economy can be grown going forward. But unfortunately, that's where we have to leave it for tonight. But thank you so much for coming through, and thank you so much for your time tonight. That was Foresight Strategist Isaac Nkama. Certainly, it is going to be an interesting time ahead when it comes to the future, and particularly around the election. But let's